What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Talking About Baseball. Today we'll be asking one question for every single MLB team post-deadline, pretty much just about what it's going to look like for their second half and going into the playoffs. Starting it off, we have the Diamondbacks, and their question is, will their deadline moves help them get to the playoffs? The deadline moves were alright, mainly their big pickup being Paul Sewald to help out their struggling bullpen, but they also got rid of Andrew Chafin, and they really didn't replace him with anyone else outside of Sewald. So their deadline wasn't super successful, especially as they're sitting in third place and out of the playoffs right now. I think they could have definitely done more for a playoff push. Next up, we have the Braves, and their question is, after a disappointing deadline, will they lose the 1 seed? The main team that could take over the 1 seed is going to be the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I don't really see anyone else taking that away. No one from the NL Central is going to be taking it, as that is one of the worst divisions in baseball, but the Braves still have a stacked roster, even though they really almost added nothing at the deadline. But the Dodgers also almost added nothing, so they may not take it, and I don't see any team rising as much to be able to pass the Braves outside of the Dodgers unless they get incredibly hot. The next question is for the Orioles, and that question is, can they hold their lead in the AL East? They recently overtook the first place lead for the Rays and gave them the 1 seed, but the Rays are still very close behind as they're still a very talented team, and the Orioles could lose that first place spot. Red Sox. Why did they say they would buy, but then not buy or sell at the deadline? The Red Sox made almost no moves, as their most notable pickup was most likely Luis Urias, who I don't think is going to contribute all that much to the team. I do think Urias will help. I don't think Urias will be able to propel this team to the playoffs, as he's not as much of an impact player you would like to take your team from 4th place to a playoff spot. My next question is for the Cubs, and that is, what are the chances they win the division? The Cubs are not far behind from out of first place right now, as they're just a few games back from first after beating the Reds twice in a row. They also absolutely dismantled the Reds in both of those games. I think they do definitely have a chance of winning the division, but I don't know if they're the best team in that NL Central. Next up, we have the White Sox, and my question for them is, why did they trade Jake Burger? They had plenty other players they could trade, like Tim Anderson and Eloy Jimenez, that had less time on their contracts and were the same age or older. They could have had control over Jake Burger for the next 4 years, but instead they traded him away to the Miami Marlins, which I love that trade, but I don't really love it for the White Sox. Next question is for the Reds, and that is, will Elly De La Cruz and the hot Reds be able to keep it up? Elly De La Cruz has not looked very good lately after pitchers have clearly been able to figure him out lately, and they are definitely on the downfall. They are still in first place of the NL Central, but they're definitely not looking as good as they were looking when they were on their hot streak in June. Next up, we have the Guardians, and their pitching has definitely carried them so far, as they have a pretty weak offense, but they also just got rid of one of their best pitchers, Aaron Savale, at the trade deadline, and they've lost Shane Bieber to injury for most likely the rest of the year. They added Noah Syndergaard at the trade deadline, but I don't think he'll be able to replace Savale and Bieber all by himself, so I don't think the Guardians' pitching is going to be good enough to bring them back to first place, but every single team in that division also sold at the deadline, so you never really know. My question for the Rockies is it time to tank? This team has looked awful since probably 2018 now, and their team just looks terrible. They have some big contracts that they will be getting rid of soon, mainly Charlie Blackmon, but they also have a big contract in Chris Bryant that they won't be getting rid of for a very long time, which in my opinion was a terrible contract for the Rockies, and they're definitely going to be a bad team for the next few years, even if they do tank. My question for the Tigers is, when does the rebuild end? We were just talking about how the Rockies have been bad since 2018, and the Tigers have been bad for even longer than that. They've already gone through the tanking, but the rebuild has not ended still. The team still looks pretty rough, and they're not doing very good this year, even though they are in third place in their division. They still have a losing record and sold at this deadline, like I just mentioned. My question for the Royals is, can Bobby Witt Jr. continue his breakout? Almost nothing else matters for this team right now, as they've been absolute trash this year, but I think they should definitely focus on Bobby Witt Jr., and I think that he will continue it, but the Royals are still not going to get any better. My question for the Angels is, will Mike Trout be able to lead his team to the playoffs? The Angels made some key deadline moves, acquiring Lucas Giolito, C.J. Cron, and Randall Grichuk, along with already having 2 stars in the game in Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. Trout is currently on the injured list, though, and when he comes back, that is when we will see the full potential of the post-deadline Angels, and I think that Trout can definitely help them to a playoff spot, but with a top-heavy AL East, I'm not sure if they'll be able to get it. My question for the Dodgers is, can they hold first place? There was 4 competitive teams in that division to start off the year, obviously the one non-competitive team being the Rockies, and the Dodgers have recently overtaken first place from the Diamondbacks, who have dropped all the way to 3rd. But the Giants could still take that spot, and I could still see the Diamondbacks and possibly even the Padres taking that spot, although it is highly unlikely given the place they're currently in. But I do think the Dodgers will keep the spot, but it's definitely going to be a tough race, and all 4 of those teams could end up making the playoffs, but I find it extremely unlikely that they do. My question for the Marlins is, can Sandy Alcantara bring back his Cy Young form in the second half? Alcantara to end out the first half has definitely looked better, but he has not been back to where he was last year. The Marlins need Alcantara to be a top-level starter like he was last year if they want to have a chance at making the playoffs. Next up, we have the Brewers, and my question for them is, will they pay or trade away Corbin Burnes? Corbin Burnes has clearly been angry at the Brewers and definitely wants an extension after he was very much underpaid in arbitration. He does not want to be in Milwaukee if he's being paid the current money he is being paid. The Brewers could also trade them, but they are currently a playoff team, so it wouldn't make much sense to trade him this offseason if they're going to be a good team. So Burnes needs to be paid or he's going to want out of Milwaukee. My question for the Twins is, will they be able to keep first place after an atrocious deadline? Like I said earlier, every single team in the AL Central pretty much sold at the deadline, but the Twins are still holding first place at a record that is just barely over 500. This entire division is quite disappointing, but the Twins could definitely still win it because, as I was saying, their division is awful. My question for the Mets is, can this team be good next year? Max Scherzer has said out loud after he got traded from the Mets that the Mets are mainly looking to be good in 2025 and 2026 and kind of have an in-between year next year. This may hurt the Mets because not very many people are probably going to want to sign with them now, but they could still definitely be a good team next year if they change their minds on their current strategy. My question for the Yankees is, will they finish in last place for the first time since 1966? That is right. The Yankees have finished in 5th before 1966, but there were 7 teams in their division at the time, and the last time they finished in last place in the current division they were in was 1966, which now is almost 60 years ago for the Yankees. My question for the Athletics is, when are they moving to Vegas? Pretty much nothing else matters for this team anymore, as they're absolute trash, and they have almost no good players on their team, except for the ones that they stupidly didn't trade away like Brent Rooker. And I think most Oakland fans really just care about when they are moving to Vegas. My question for the Phillies is, can they make another crazy comeback? The Phillies were not looking like a playoff team last year until they were, and they came all the way back and made the World Series. The Phillies didn't have a super active deadline this year as they acquired Michael Lorenzen, and they've lost first baseman Rhys Hoskins for the rest of the year, but have put Bryce Harper there recently. I think the Phillies can definitely be a playoff team as they currently are, but I'm not sure if they'll make it as far as the World Series for 2 years in a row. My question for the Pirates is, can O'Neal Cruz save this team? The NL Central is more crowded at the top now as the Cubs are getting better, but there's still definitely room for another team to be good, as there isn't really a true team that is the best in that division. And the Pirates are getting O'Neal Cruz back probably sooner rather than later in the next month or so, and I do think he could propel this team with his energy and skill, potentially to the top, but I'm not sure if they'll be able to make it that high. My question for the Padres is, why would you buy if you're not going to get anyone good? The Padres went on an insane winning streak, sweeping the Rangers right before the deadline, and they said that even though they had a below 500 record, they would be buying at the deadline. They didn't trade away any key prospects, as at this point they don't really have any left, but they did trade for Rich Hill, some big acquisitions at the deadline that will definitely help their team a ton, as this makes their team so much better, because I'm sure G-Man Choi is going to end up winning MVP this year. I bet you the Padres are going to win every single game for the rest of the season, and it doesn't even matter that they didn't trade Juan Soto. Next question. My next question is for the Giants, and that is, are they contenders or pretenders? The Giants on paper really don't look like that great of a team to me, but they are currently having a playoff spot as they are the 4 seed with the top wild card spot. I don't really know how far they'll make it in the playoffs, as like I said, I don't really think they're all that great of a team, and they really only have one good pitcher, and that's Logan Webb. But I do think that they could still definitely make the playoffs, but I hope they don't, as I would like a team with some more energy and some more fun players to watch, like the Diamondbacks' Corbin Carroll and the Marlins' Jazz Chisholm. My question for the Mariners is, will a miracle run happen? It kind of happened last year as they made the playoffs for the first time in 21 years, although they did win the first series against the Blue Jays and then get swept by the Astros in the second round as their team clearly wasn't good enough last year. The team has looked even worse this year, but could a second half miracle run happen if Julio Rodriguez can figure it out? My question for the Cardinals is, why is Paul Goldschmidt still on this team? They're looking to be good next year. Paul Goldschmidt's contract is up after next year, meaning if they want to be good next year, they're going to have to look to bring Paul Goldschmidt back either this offseason on an extension or bring him back after next offseason, which is going to be tough as the Cardinals definitely have their big two stars in Goldschmidt and Arenado, and without one of them, they're not going to be successful. My question for the Rays is the pressure getting to them? They've already lost first place in their division from the Orioles, and the Rays just don't really seem like they're playing like they were at the beginning. Obviously, you can't do that all season as they started off 13-0, but since then they definitely have not looked like the greatest team ever, and I'm not even sure if they'll for sure make the playoffs at this point, as they've been steadily falling down the rankings. My question for the Rangers is, can they hold their lead over Houston? It looked like they definitely could after they acquired two big pitchers in Max Scherzer and Jordan Montgomery, but then the Astros countered both of their actions, getting their former Cy Young Award winner Justin Verlander that they lost just a few months ago. Verlander's definitely going to help out this Astros team, but obviously Scherzer and Montgomery will help out the Rangers, and that's going to be a really nice divisional lead fight for the rest of the year. My question for the Blue Jays is, can Alek Manoah bounce back and lead them to the playoffs? Manoah has not looked particularly good this year, although he has definitely looked better since the All-Star break when he got called back up. The Blue Jays are scuffling for a playoff spot as they are currently the 6th seed, but the Red Sox are right behind them, along with the Mariners, Angels, and Yankees, who are all fighting for that spot. I think the Blue Jays will most likely keep it in the end, but I think they're definitely going to need some more help, and Alek Manoah finally being good again might be that guy they need. And finally, my question for the Nationals is, will Steven Strasburg ever come back healthy on his current contract? If he doesn't come back healthy on the contract, I don't think he will ever get another contract. But Steven Strasburg has been paid almost $1 million for every inning pitched so far on his contract, as that's how little he's been on the field. Strasburg's deal has been very much disappointing, although if they did choose Rendon instead of Strasburg, it wouldn't have ended up much better as he's been pretty bad ever since that World Series win as well. But Strasburg hasn't only been injured all the time, but he has not looked good when he wasn't injured either, and I don't think he'll be back ever again in the majors, in my opinion. Well, that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Bye.